Hello friends, welcome to my video. Today I am going to talk about static keyword uses in C Sharp. As we know, C Sharp is an object-oriented programming language, and a static keyword violates the OOPS concepts a bit, but can be very useful in certain circumstances. We'll learn why, how, and where we can use a static keyword in C Sharp program. So before we get started, just a quick reminder to subscribe my channel, hit the red button and don't forget to click on the little bell icon. That way you will be notified every time I upload a new video. Okay, without any further delay, let's get started. What is a static in C Sharp? A static is a modifier that is used to declare a static member, which belongs to the type itself rather than to a specific object. The static modifier can be used to declare static classes. In classes, interfaces, and structs, we may add the static modifier to fields, methods, properties, operators, events, and constructors. Okay, let's try to understand with the help of example shown over here. So there is a class invoice and I have defined a variable with the static modifier. So it became a static variable. So that's what I have written: public static double standard tax is equal to 0.1. Now there is another class named program that has main method, which is an entry point of this application. So here what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to print a standard tax is and the standard tax value. So here a standard tax value, how we can access is, as it is a static variable, so we need to access with the class name. So we need to write class name dot static variable name, and that's why I wrote invoice dot standard tax. Please note that we don't need to create an instance of the invoice class in order to access a static variable. In our case, a standard tax, right? So because a static variable belongs to the type, that is class, rather than to a specific object. Okay, so there are various places where we can use a static modifier. So if we apply at field level, it becomes the static field. Similarly, method becomes a static method, properties, static properties, operators, static operators, events, static events, constructor, static constructor, and class level, it becomes as a static class. So we will see the important ones one by one in detail. A static variable in C Sharp. What is a static variable? A static variable is a variable with a static modifier and it gets shared among all class objects. We access the static variables with the class name, that is type name. No object is required for accessing the static variables, as we have discussed in previous examples, right? Okay, let's see the example shown over here. So here there is a class invoice and I have defined a static variable as well as the instance variable. A static variable is having the static keywords. That's what it becomes as a static variable. And instance variable, we don't have a static keyword. Now there is another class program. It has main method, which is an entry point of this application. So here what I'm going to do, I'm just going to access this static variable. And how we are going to access? We are going to access with the class name dot static variable name. That's what I have written, invoice dot standard tax. So this statement is going to get printed into this console window. The standard tax is invoice dot standard tax. What is the value that we standard tax is containing? That value is going to get printed. Now, if we want to access this special tax, which is an instance variable, so for that, we need to create an instance of this invoice class. And that's what I have written, invoice obj invoice is equal to new invoice. And with the help of object of this invoice class, we are going to access this special tax, that is the instance variable. And that's what I have written, obj invoice dot special tax. The special tax is obj invoice dot special tax. That statement is going to get printed. And if you try to access this special tax with the help of class name, it won't be accessible because this is the instance variable. We need to create an instance for this particular class and then only we can access this special tax variable, which is the instance variable. Okay. Now if you see the output shown over here, standard tax is 0.1, special tax is 0.05. That's what it got printed, right? Now we knew what a static variable in C Sharp is and how we are going to define and access them. Now we need to focus on the important points of this static variable. Number one, C Sharp does not support a static local variable. Local variable means that variables that are declared in the method scope. So there is no meaning of, defining this static local variable. And that's what C Sharp is not going to support that. That's what this statement is saying. C Sharp does not support static local variables, that is variable that are declared in the method scope. Okay, number two, static variables are used when only one copy of the variable is required. If you are going to define this static variable, there will be one copy and then it will be shared across all instances of a class. That's why a static variable statement is written over here. Static variable are used when only one copy of the variable is required. Static variables are commonly shared across all instances of a class. We have already seen that, right? A static variable can be defined in either static class or non-static class. Here I have defined this static variable in non-static class. Similarly, we can define it into the static class also. That is permitted in C#. A static method in C#. What is a static method in C#? The static method is a method with a static modifier and enables us to execute commands related to the class type, but not specific to the object instances. In other words, a static method cannot access non-static class level members. Okay, let's try to understand with the help of examples shown over here. So this is example we have already seen into the static variable example itself. Okay, but here I just want to show you the static method, right? And if you see, there is a class invoice, we have two variables. One is the static variable and the second one is the instance variable. And there is a class program, it has main method, which is a static method. And that's what I wanted to show you. This is the static method. And how we are going to write it? We are writing the general method, but we are having this static modifier to it. And that's what it becomes as a static method. The public static void main is nothing but the static method over here. So static method, inside that, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to access this as standard tags. So how we are going to access, because this is the static variable, we need to use this invoice class, right? Invoice class name and the static variable name, and that's what this invoice.standard tags is going to get accessed via this way, and then this statement is going to get printed. Similarly, instance variable. So whenever we are going to access instance variable, so how we are going to access, we need to create an instance of this particular class, even though this is the static method, but inside that we are able to access this instance variable, but that time we will have to create an instance of that particular class here itself, and then only we can use that. So that's what I have written, invoice obj invoice is equal to new invoice, and then I am accessing this special tags with the help of object of this invoice class. That's what I have written, obj invoice dot special tag. And if you see the output, that output is coming as a standard tax is 0.1, a special tax is 0.05, right? So we have seen what is the static method, how we define that, and how we are going to write that, and how we are going to access it inside that any instance variable or the static variable, right? Now we will be focusing on the important points of the static method. Number one, static methods can be public or private. And if you see here, I have written this static method as a public one. Okay. Number two, for static methods, we cannot mark override, virtual or abstract, because we are going to call with the help of class name. So there is no meaning to mark this with the override, virtual or abstract. That's what C# does not support that, and this statement is just indicating the same point. For static methods, we cannot mark override, virtual or abstract. Number three, to access the instance method via the static method, it must first instantiate an object and then invoke the method through that object, and that's what I have done over here. I have created an object of this invoice class, and then we are going to access this variable. Similarly, we can access this instance method also if it is defined under this invoice class, right? Because we have created an instance of this invoice, then we are able to access instance variable or instance method altogether. But let's suppose if we have this static method inside this invoice, then we will have to use this class name dot static method name. A static constructor in C#. So what is a static constructor? A static constructor enables us to initialize any static data or to perform a particular action that needs to be performed only once. So a class can have a single static constructor that must have no access modifiers and no parameters. So basically, a static constructor is very useful when we are planning to initialize some static data, or we are planning to perform some any action that needs to be performed only once. If such type of requirement is there, then we can go for the static constructor. Okay, let's try to understand with the help of examples shown over here. So there is a class named my class. It has a static variable. And what a static variable is? A static read only long my static variable. So this static variable, we are going to initialize at the runtime. Okay, and that's what I have just declared it over here. Now, a static my class. This is nothing but the static constructor. How we are going to define this static constructor? We just need to use this static modifier to the class name, and it becomes a static constructor. Now in this static constructor, what I'm going to do, I'm going to initialize this static variable. So my static variable is equal to datetime.now.tick. So these information is going to get stored into this static variable. And here, just for the demo purpose, I have written this console.writeLine statement. And this statement is going to get printed from the static constructor. And that's what I have written, printing from the static constructor. There is an instance constructor. Why I have written? Because I just want to show the demo that I'm printing this statement from this my class constructor, which is nothing but the instance constructor as a default one. Okay, console.writeLine printing from instance constructor. And now there is another class program which has main method. So in that main method, we have created instance of my class 2 times. So my class obj1 is equal to new my class obj2 is equal to new my class. So when we are going to write this statement, so first this static class is going to get executed first time, and that's what this my static variable is just going to get assigned this datetime.now.ticks value, and then this statement is just going to get printed. This constructor, instance constructor, is going to get invoked, and this statement is going to get printed. When we are going to call this, when we are going to instantiate of this my class first time, but at the next time when we are going to instantiate this my class obj2, so that time only this instance constructor is going to get called. And that's what, if you see the output, printing from a static constructor, it got printed, because when we created this object of this my class first time, so it went and invoked this my class constructor, which is the static one, right? So that's what this statement got printed. And then this statement, the my class constructor, this statement got printed, printing from the instance constructor, and that's what you are able to see. But when we went ahead and created the another object of this my class, so that time only this instance constructor is going to get invoked, and that's what we are able to see. This second time also, this printing from instance constructor is just going to get printed. There is no printing from a static constructor, because as per definition of the static constructor, it is going to get performed only once, and that's what this first statement got printed when we created an instance of this my class first time, right? So that's the beauty of the static constructor. Now we have seen what is a static constructor, how to access this static constructor, right? Because we are not going to access, it is going to get called automatically, right? So we will be seeing how and when it is going to get called. Okay, so let's see the important points of the static constructor. Number one, a class can have a single static constructor. Let's suppose we have created one class. So this class basically can have only one static constructor. It's not like that we are going to define multiple static constructor. It should be only one, and that's what this statement is talking about. A class can have a single static constructor. Number two, a static constructor must have no access modifier and no parameter. That's what you are seeing. There is a no access modifier and there is no parameters, right? Number three, a static constructor can be defined either a static class or a non-static class. Here I have defined this static constructor into this non-static class, but we can also define it into the static class, right? Number four, a static constructor is called automatically in two scenarios. Number one, before the first instance is created. So when we are going to create this instance, before that, this statement got printed, right? Because this static my class got invoked. And then second scenario is any static members are referenced. Let's suppose in this my class program in main method, if we are trying to access this my static variable, so that time also it is just going to get invoked this static. Either in these two scenarios, it is going to get invoked. Static class in C#. What is a static class in C#? A static class is a class that is declared static and contains only static members. That is very, very important. A static class is going to hold only the static members. Okay, so a static class is basically the same as creating a class that contains only static members and a private constructor. So if you see here, a static class is equal to class with only static members plus it should be a private constructor. Then it is going to get equivalent with the static class. So that's for understanding. But instead of writing, static members, everything, and creating the private constructor, we can simply create this static class. Okay, let's try to understand with the help of examples shown over here. So there is a static class invoice, and I have defined this static variable. As we said just now, that a static class is going to have only the static members, and that's what this static variable is, a static member of this static class invoice, right? Now there is a class named program. It has main method, which is an entry point of this application. Here I'm just going to access this standard tags, that is the static variable under this static class. So how we are going to access? We can access with the help of class name dot static variable name, and that's what this invoice dot standard tags I have written. So this statement is just going to get printed standard tags is, and whatever the value this standard tags variable is having, so those values is going to get printed, and that's what if you see the output, standard tags is 0.1 got printed. Okay, so that's how this static class behaves. Okay, now focus on important points of the static class. Number one, objects of the static class cannot be created. Number two, no inheritance can be performed in a static class. So basically it is just going to behave as a sealed class. Okay. Number three, a static class contains only static members, and that's what we have seen. As per definitions also, a static class is going to get declared static and contains only the static members. So this is the third statement, is talking about the same thing. A static class contains only static members. Number four, for a static class, the compiler makes sure that no instance member are accidentally added and no instance of the static class gets created. So in order to create class that has only static members and making constructor as a private to just behave as a static class, instead of that we can create a static class. So compiler is going to give us surety that no instance of members are going to be accidentally added or no instance of the static class gets created. Okay, let's see all these things practically in the Visual Studio. Okay, so here we are on Visual Studio. Here we are going to see the demo of the static variable, instance variable, and static method uses. So for that, what I have done, I have created one console application, a static demo, and it has program.cs file. In program.cs file, I have written this class invoice. It has instance variable as well as the static variable. Public static double standard tags is equal to 0.1. This is the static variable. I have assigned the value of 0.1 value to 8. And special tags I have assigned 0.0.5 value to 8. This is nothing but the instance variable. Now there is a method print me inside this class invoice, and print me is nothing but the static method. This static method, what I'm doing, I'm just printing this statement. I am getting printed from a static method print me. Okay. Now there is a class named program. It has main method, which is nothing but the entry point of this application. And this main method is the static method, right? So this is the static method. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to print this statement that I'm giving the demo of the static variable, instance variable, and a static method. The next statement, what I'm doing, I'm going to access this static variable standard text with the help of class name, and that's how we are going to access a static variable, right? And that's what I have written. Console write line standard text is invoice.standard text, the class name dot variable name, and that's what we are going to access this static variable in this statement. Now as we have defined this print me method, which is nothing but the static method, so in order to access this print me method, or maybe calling this method, we are going to call with the help of class name itself. We don't need to create any instance of this invoice class. That's what, if you see here, I am just writing class name dot print me method, invoice dot print me, and this method is going to get invoked. And once this invoked, then this statement is just going to get printed into this console window. And then in order to access this instance variable, we will have to create an instance of this invoice class, and that's what I have created, an object of this invoice class. Invoice obj invoice is equal to new invoice, and here I have written this console.writeLine statement. So here I'm just going to access this special tags with the help of obj invoice, which is nothing but an object of this invoice class. So obj invoice dot special tag. Okay, so that's how this program looks like. Let me execute this and see the output. Okay, so output got appear into this console window. If you see here, this demo of a static variable, an instance variable, and a static method got printed from this console.writeLine statement, right? And then a standard tags is 0.1. So I have called this a static variable into this console.writeLine statement. So this statement got printed value of the 0.1 of the standard tags, and that's what we are able to see here. Standard tags is 0.1. and then I have called this static method with the help of class name. So this statement got executed, and that's what we are able to see. I am getting printed from static method print me. And then I have created an instance of this invoice class, and then I have accessed this special text with the help of instance name, right? And that's what this instance name, we are able to access it, and 0.0.0.05, that value that was assigned to this special text got printed here. The special text is 0.05, right? That's how this static variable, instance variable, and static method works. Okay, let me tell you one more thing. Let's suppose I'm just going to try to access this special tags with the help of class name, whether we are able to access or not. Let me do that. I'm just going to click dot. So if you see here, I'm able to see only standard tags. We are not able to get anything, the special tags listed over here. So IntelliSense suggestion based on the context, it is giving me exact thing that a special tags is the instance variable, so it is not going to get access with the help of class name, right? So if you see here, a standard tag, that is the static variable, it got listed, and also the print me, which is nothing but the static method defined into this invoice class, so it is also there. So these two are the static one, a static member of this class. That's what when we are going to write invoice dot, then IntelliSense is going to suggest me, okay, you can use this static variable or you can use this static method altogether. So we are not going to get this instance variable listed over here. So that's a very important point. So IntelliSense is going to guide us. Okay, so this instance variable is not accessible into this with the help of class name, because these are not the static one. Okay, so that's what I just wanted to show you. Okay, let's suppose if you want to use this static class instead of the non-static class. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to write a static keyword over here, right? So it becomes a static class. So when it becomes a static class, this instance variable is no longer be a part of this invoice class. So that's what we need to just comment this. And also I'm just going to change here this one. I'm just going to see the demo of the static class. So I'm just going to write this static class over here. And now, because this special text variable, that is nothing but the instance variable, is no longer associated with this static class, so we just need to comment these two things, right? Okay, because this is the static class, we cannot create an instance of this invoice class. So this statement is not valid at all here. The invoice obj invoice is equal to new invoice, I have commented. And also the accessing this special tags, which is nothing but the instance variable, is no longer a part of this static class invoice method, static class invoice, right? So that's what I have commented, these two statements. Okay, and everything remains same, whether we are going to access this static variable and a static method in the non-static class. Similar way we are going to access into the static class also. Let me show you. This is the way how we have accessed this static variable, and this is the way how we have call this print me method, which is nothing but the static method into this class invoice. Okay, let me execute this and show the output. Okay, so output got appear into this console window, and if you see, the first demo of a static class got printed, and then this statement, a standard tax is invoice.standard tax, because I have accessed this static variable with the help of a static class name invoice.standard tax. So this statement got printed over here, and then I have called this print me method, and in this print me method this statement is written, and that's what we are able to see this statement printed over here in this console window. So basically a static class and non-static class both are almost similar, only the difference is a static class is not going to have any non-static members, whether it's a variable, whether it's a method. So here we are on Visual Studio. Here we are going to see the demo of the static constructor in C#. So for that, I have created one console application static demo and program.cs file. There is a class in it. So in program.cs file, I have written two classes. So there is a class named my class. It has a static variable, public static read only long my static variable. And this static variable we are going to initialize at the runtime. Okay. So for that, I have written this static constructor over here. So my class, static my class, this is nothing but the static constructor, and here I'm just going to assign the value to the my static variable. So my static variable is equal to datetime.now.text. So this information is going to get stored into this static variable, my static variable. And then just for the demo purpose, I have written this statement at console.writeLine printing from the static constructor. Similarly, there is a instance constructor. That is nothing but the default constructor over here. So public my class console.write printing from the instance constructor. Okay. Now what I'm going to do, there is another class named program. It has main method, which is an entry point of this application. So here I'm just printing demo of the static constructor in C#. So here what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create a my class instance first time, right? So what will happen when we are going to write this statement? So this static my class is just going to invoke first. So this date time dot now text value, it is going to get assigned to this my static variable, and then this statement should get printing from the static constructor. Once this processing is done for this constructor, then it will come and invoke this my class constructor, and then this statement is just going to get printed. Okay, so this my class constructor is just going to invoke for the first time when we are going to invoke this class instance first time. But let's suppose if we are going to create an instance of the second time, and this statement I have written my class obj2 is equal to new my class, so that time this static constructor is not going to get executed. Only this instance constructor is going to get executed, and this statement is only just going to get printed. Okay, we will see. And then in the next statement, what I have done, I am just going to access this static variable, which is defined under this my class. So that's what I'm just going to access this static variable. How we are going to access? We can access with the help of class name. That's what I have written, my class dot my static variable. So whatever this variable is having the value, it is just going to get printed into this console window. Let me execute this program and see the output. Okay, so output got appear into this console window. If you see here, the first statement got printed demo of a static constructor in C#. It got printed, right? And then when I have created an instance of the my class first time, then it's just going to get called this static constructor, and that's what this statement got printed. So printing from the static constructor, it got printed. And then it just invoked the instance constructor. So this statement got printed, printing from instance constructor. And that's what we are able to see in the second statement, printing from the instance constructor. But next time when we created an object to instance of this my class, so that time only this my class, that is the instance constructor, is just invoked. And that's what this statement got printed, printing from the instance constructor. So this time this static constructor did not get executed, because as per the static constructor, it is just going to called only one time before any instance constructor is invoked or member is accessed. So that's what it just printed only one time. But the second object instance itself, it just invoked this my class instance constructor, and that's what this statement got printed. And then I have accessed this my static variable, which is assigned when this static constructor got invoked. So this date time dot now text got captured and into stored into this my static variable, and this my static variable I have accessed with the help of class name, and that's what it got printed over here. Okay, so now that brings me to end of my session. To sum up, in this video we saw what C# static keyword is and how and when to use it as a variable, method, constructor and class level. So I hope you must be having a grip on the static concepts in C# now. So write useful in comment if you think this video was useful for you. That's all for this video, guys. If you like this video, hit the like button, share it with your friends and colleagues, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done already. Thanks for watching. See you next video.